The year was 1942, and the world was engulfed in the flames of World War II. The Soviet Union, under the iron grip of Joseph Stalin, was fighting for its survival against the relentless onslaught of Nazi Germany. The Eastern Front had become a brutal theater of war with millions of lives hanging in the balance. Yet, amid the bloodshed and chaos, an event occurred that would forever alter the course of history. An event so extraordinary that it has remained hidden from public knowledge for decades. It was during this darkest hour of the Soviet Union's history that a small group of Soviet military personnel and scientists made contact with beings not of this earth. This encounter, shrouded in secrecy and buried beneath layers of disinformation, remains one of the most enigmatic and controversial episodes of the 20th century. The implications of this event stretch far beyond the battlefield, raising profound questions about humanity's place in the universe and the true nature of the war that was being fought. The Prelude to Contact. To understand the significance of the 1942 extraterrestrial contact, it is essential to consider the broader context of the time. The Soviet Union was in a desperate struggle for survival. The Nazi invasion, known as Operation Barbarossa, had brought the German war machine to the very gates of Moscow. The Red Army, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, was reeling under the pressure, and the Soviet leadership was scrambling to find a way to turn the tide of the war. Amid this turmoil, Soviet scientists and military leaders were tasked with exploring every possible avenue to gain an advantage over the enemy. This included not only conventional military strategies, but also more unconventional and esoteric approaches. The Soviet leadership, known for its ruthlessness and willingness to explore even the most outlandish ideas, began to take an interest in reports of strange phenomena that had been surfacing across the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. These reports, which ranged from sightings of mysterious lights in the sky to encounters with strange beings, were initially dismissed as wartime hysteria. However, as the number of reports grew and as the descriptions provided by witnesses became more consistent, the Soviet leadership began to take notice. What had once been considered mere superstition was now being scrutinized as a potential source of new knowledge or even a secret weapon that could be used against the Nazis. In late 1941, a top-secret directive was issued by the Soviet High Command instructing a select group of scientists and military personnel to investigate these phenomena. This group, operating under the utmost secrecy, was given access to the most advanced technology and resources available at the time. Their mission was simple: determine whether these strange occurrences were the result of enemy activity, natural phenomena, or something else entirely. The incident in the Ural Mountains. The breakthrough came in the winter of 1942, in the remote and rugged terrain of the Ural Mountains. The Urals, with their dense forests and isolated villages, had long been a region steeped in mystery and folklore. Local legends spoke of strange lights and otherworldly beings that inhabited the mountains, but these stories had always been dismissed as mere superstition. It was in this region that a Soviet military patrol conducting routine reconnaissance reported an encounter with a large, unidentified object. The patrol, consisting of hardened veterans of the Eastern Front, described the object as a metallic disc-shaped craft that appeared to hover silently above the treetops. The craft, which emitted a faint pulsating light, was unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. The soldiers' initial reaction was one of fear and disbelief. They had seen the horrors of war, but this was something entirely different, something that defied all logic and reason. After a few tense moments, the craft began to descend slowly, coming to rest in a clearing just a few hundred meters from the patrol's position. The patrol leader, a seasoned officer named Captain Ivanov, ordered his men to take up defensive positions around the clearing. Despite their fear, the soldiers obeyed, their rifles trained on the strange craft. For several minutes, nothing happened. The craft remained stationary, its surface reflecting the cold winter light. Then, without warning, a section of the craft's hull began to open, revealing a ramp that extended to the ground. What happened next would forever change the lives of those who witnessed it. The first encounter. As the ramp touched the ground, a figure emerged from the craft. The being, standing approximately 7 feet tall, was humanoid in appearance but distinctly different from any human the soldiers had ever seen. Its skin was pale and smooth, with a faint, almost metallic sheen. The being's eyes were large and almond-shaped, with a piercing gaze that seemed to penetrate the very souls of the men who stood before it. The soldiers, gripped by a mixture of fear and awe, held their ground, unsure of how to respond. Captain Ivanov, sensing the tension, stepped forward cautiously, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. The being, seemingly understanding the gesture, raised its own hand in response. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted from one of hostility to one of cautious curiosity. The being began to communicate not through spoken words, but through a form of telepathy. The soldiers, who had been expecting some kind of alien language, were shocked to hear the being's thoughts directly in their minds. The being introduced itself as a representative of an extraterrestrial civilization, one that had been observing Earth for some time. The being explained that it had come to offer assistance to humanity during this time of crisis. The war that was raging across the globe had not gone unnoticed by the extraterrestrials, and they were concerned about the potential consequences for both Earth and the broader cosmos. The being's message was clear: the continued development and use of nuclear weapons posed a grave threat not only to humanity, but to the entire galaxy. Captain Ivanov, struggling to process the gravity of the situation, asked the being what kind of assistance it was offering. The being responded by saying that it possessed knowledge and technology far beyond anything known to humanity. This technology could be used to end the war quickly and decisively, but there was a catch. In exchange for this assistance, the Soviet Union would need to agree to certain conditions that would limit the use of nuclear weapons and ensure that any future conflicts were resolved through peaceful means. The offer was tempting, but Captain Ivanov knew that it was not his decision to make. The being, understanding this, instructed Ivanov to relay the message to his superiors. With that, the being returned to the craft, and the ramp retracted. The craft then ascended silently into the sky, disappearing from view in a matter of seconds. The response from Moscow. Captain Ivanov and his men were left standing in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. After regaining their composure, Ivanov immediately ordered his men to return to their base and report the encounter to their superiors. The report, once received, was quickly classified as top secret and sent directly to the highest levels of the Soviet government. The response from Moscow was swift. A special delegation consisting of high-ranking military officers and top scientists was dispatched to the Ural Mountains to investigate the incident. This delegation was tasked not only with verifying the details of the encounter, but also with determining the authenticity of the being's offer. Upon their arrival, the delegation conducted a thorough investigation of the site where the encounter had taken place. They interviewed the soldiers who had witnessed the event, examined the surrounding area for any signs of radiation or other anomalies, and collected soil and plant samples for analysis. The delegation's findings were clear. The encounter had indeed taken place, and there was no evidence to suggest that it had been a hoax or a hallucination. With this confirmation in hand, the delegation returned to Moscow to brief the Soviet leadership. Stalin, who was already aware of the reports of strange phenomena, listened intently as the delegation presented its findings. The prospect of gaining access to advanced extraterrestrial technology was tantalizing, especially at a time when the Soviet Union was fighting for its very survival. However, Stalin was also deeply suspicious. He knew that the offer of assistance came with strings attached, and he was not willing to give up the development of nuclear weapons, an area in which the Soviet Union was already making significant progress. Stalin's paranoia, coupled with his belief in the superiority of the Soviet state, led him to question the motives of the extraterrestrials. Were they truly benevolent, or was this some kind of trap designed to weaken the Soviet Union? After much deliberation, Stalin decided to proceed with caution. He authorized the delegation to establish further contact with the extraterrestrials, but he made it clear that the Soviet Union would not make any commitments until it fully understood the nature of the offer. The delegation was instructed to gather as much information as possible about the extraterrestrial civilization, its technology, and its intentions. The secret negotiations. Over the next several months, a series of secret meetings took place between the Soviet delegation and the extraterrestrial representatives. These meetings, held in remote locations far from prying eyes, were characterized by a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and intrigue. The extraterrestrials, who appeared to be highly advanced both technologically and intellectually, provided the Soviet delegation with detailed information about their civilization and their understanding of the universe. The extraterrestrials explained that they were part of a larger interstellar alliance, composed of multiple civilizations that had achieved a high level of technological and spiritual development. This alliance had been monitoring Earth for centuries, observing humanity's progress and its propensity for conflict. The outbreak of World War II and the development of nuclear weapons had raised alarms within the alliance, prompting them to make contact with humanity in an effort to prevent a catastrophe. The extraterrestrials were particularly concerned about the use of nuclear weapons, which they explained had the potential to cause damage not only to Earth but to the fabric of space-time itself. They described the detonation of nuclear weapons as a form of dimensional disruption, which could have far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate destruction on Earth. The extraterrestrials warned that if humanity continued on its current path, it could trigger a chain reaction that would affect other civilizations across the galaxy. In exchange for agreeing to limit the development and use of nuclear weapons, the extraterrestrials offered to share their knowledge of advanced energy sources, propulsion systems, and medical technologies. They also offered to assist the Soviet Union in ending the war by providing intelligence on enemy movements and strategies, as well as by neutralizing key military targets. The Soviet delegation, while intrigued by the offer, remained cautious. They pressed the extraterrestrials for more information about their motives and the nature of the interstellar alliance. The extraterrestrials responded by emphasizing their commitment to peace and the preservation of life. They explained that their civilization had evolved beyond the need for war and had dedicated itself to the pursuit of knowledge and the exploration of the cosmos. Despite these assurances, the Soviet delegation remained divided. Some members were eager to accept the extraterrestrials' offer. seeing it as an opportunity to gain a decisive advantage in the war and to secure the Soviet Union's place as a global superpower. Others, however, were more skeptical, fearing that the extraterrestrials' true intentions were not as benevolent as they claimed. The dilemma. As the secret negotiations continued, the Soviet leadership faced a profound dilemma. On one hand, the offer of advanced technology and assistance in the war effort was incredibly tempting. The possibility of ending the war quickly and decisively and of gaining access to technologies that could propel the Soviet Union into a new era of scientific and military dominance was almost too good to pass up. On the other hand, the conditions attached to the offer posed a significant challenge. The development of nuclear weapons was a key component of the Soviet Union's long-term strategy, and Stalin was not willing to abandon it. The Soviet leadership also remained deeply suspicious of the extraterrestrials' motives. The idea of placing the future of the Soviet Union in the hands of an alien civilization, no matter how advanced, was a deeply unsettling prospect. Stalin, ever the pragmatist, ultimately decided to continue the negotiations while hedging his bets. He authorized the delegation to accept certain aspects of the extraterrestrials' offer, such as intelligence on enemy movements and strategies, while delaying any decision on the more controversial aspects, such as the limitation of nuclear weapons. Stalin also ordered the establishment of a secret research program to study the technologies provided by the extraterrestrials and to develop countermeasures in case the offer proved to be a ruse. This decision marked the beginning of a complex and secretive relationship between the Soviet Union and the extraterrestrial civilization, a relationship that would have far-reaching implications for the future of both. The Secret War. As the war continued to rage across Europe, the Soviet Union began to quietly implement some of the intelligence provided by the extraterrestrials. This intelligence, which included detailed information on German troop movements and supply lines, allowed the Red Army to achieve several key victories on the Eastern Front. However, the Soviet leadership was careful not to reveal the true source of this intelligence, attributing the successes to traditional military strategy and reconnaissance. At the same time, the Soviet Union began to study the advanced technologies provided by the extraterrestrials. This research, conducted in secret laboratories deep within the Soviet Union, focused on areas such as energy generation, material science, and propulsion systems. The scientists involved in the program were sworn to secrecy, and all findings were classified as top secret. Despite the progress made in these areas, the Soviet leadership remained wary of the extraterrestrials. Stalin, in particular, was concerned about the long-term implications of the relationship. He feared that the extraterrestrials might have ulterior motives and that their assistance could come at a greater cost than initially anticipated. To address these concerns, Stalin ordered the development of a parallel research program focused on developing countermeasures and defenses against potential extraterrestrial threats. This secret war, a war fought not with guns and tanks but with intelligence and technology, continued behind the scenes as the visible conflict on the battlefield raged on. The Soviet Union, while benefiting from the assistance provided by the extraterrestrials, remained deeply cautious and suspicious. The leadership knew that they were playing a dangerous game, one that could have profound consequences for the future of the nation and the world. The end of the war and the beginning of the Cold War. As the tide of the war turned in favor of the Allies, the Soviet Union emerged as one of the victorious powers. The Red Army's advance into Eastern Europe and the eventual capture of Berlin marked the end of the Nazi regime and the beginning of a new era in world history. However, the victory was tempered by the knowledge of the secret war that had been fought behind the scenes. With the war in Europe over, the focus of the Soviet leadership shifted to the emerging Cold War with the United States. The relationship with the extraterrestrials, which had been a closely guarded secret during the war, now took on a new significance. The Soviet Union, aware that the United States had also been exploring the UFO phenomenon, was determined to maintain its technological edge. The secret research programs that had been established during the war were expanded, with an increased focus on developing weapons and defenses based on the extraterrestrial technology. At the same time, the Soviet leadership continued to engage in cautious negotiations with the extraterrestrials, seeking to balance the benefits of the relationship with the need to protect the nation's sovereignty. The extraterrestrials, for their part, remained committed to their goal of preventing a global nuclear conflict. They continued to provide the Soviet Union with intelligence and technological assistance while pressing for a reduction in nuclear weapons development. However, the onset of the Cold War and the intensification of the arms race made it increasingly difficult for the Soviet leadership to agree to these demands. As the Cold War deepened, the relationship between the Soviet Union and the extraterrestrial civilization became increasingly complex and fraught with tension. The Soviet leadership, while benefiting from the technological advancements provided by the extraterrestrials, remained deeply suspicious of their motives. The fear of betrayal, coupled with the desire to maintain the nation's independence, led to a strategy of cautious engagement, one that sought to extract as much benefit as possible while minimizing the risks. The legacy of the 1942 contact, the events of 1942, and the subsequent relationship between the Soviet Union and the extraterrestrial civilization had a profound impact on the course of world history. The technology and intelligence provided by the extraterrestrials played a significant role in the Soviet Union's wartime successes and its post-war technological advancements. However, the secrecy surrounding these events ensured that their true significance remained hidden from the public for decades. As the Cold War came to an end and the Soviet Union dissolved, more information about the 1942 contact began to surface. Former officials, scientists, and military personnel began to speak out about their experiences, providing glimpses into the secret history of the Soviet Union's relationship with extraterrestrial beings. These revelations sparked renewed interest in the UFO phenomenon and raised questions about the extent of government secrecy and the true nature of humanity's interactions with other civilizations. The legacy of the 1942 contact is one of both promise and peril. The technology and knowledge provided by the extraterrestrials offered the potential for tremendous advancements, but they also posed significant ethical and existential challenges. The decision to engage with the extraterrestrials, while necessary in the context of the war, carried with it profound consequences that continue to be felt to this day. The story of the 1942 contact is a reminder of the complex and often ambiguous nature of humanity's quest for knowledge and power. It is a story of ambition, fear, and the struggle to balance the pursuit of progress with the need for caution and restraint. As more information comes to light, the full impact of these events may finally be understood, and the lessons learned may help guide humanity as it continues to explore its place in the universe. Conclusion: the quest for truth. The story of the Soviet Union's contact with extraterrestrials in 1942 is one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic episodes of the 20th century. It is a story that has been hidden from the public for decades, buried beneath layers of secrecy and disinformation. Yet, As more information emerges, the truth of what happened during those dark days may finally come to light. The implications of this story are profound. If true, it suggests that humanity is not alone in the universe, and that our actions on Earth have consequences that reach far beyond our planet. It raises questions about the nature of power, the responsibilities of those in positions of authority, and the ethical dilemmas that arise when dealing with forces beyond our understanding. As the quest for truth continues, it is essential to remain vigilant and critical of the information that is presented. The events of 1942 serve as a reminder that even in the most secretive of societies, the search for knowledge and understanding cannot be suppressed forever. The truth, no matter how unsettling, must eventually come to light. The legacy of the 1942 contact is still being written, and as more information becomes available, the full story may finally be revealed. Until then, the events of that year remain one of the great mysteries of the Cold War era, a hidden chapter in the history of humanity's encounters with the unknown.